I'm Marilyn Nickel, and this is Ty Martin, your two friendly neighborhood PhDs. We want to collaborate on kind of like a series, maybe with some themes and some cool things that we like to talk about.
Yes, that sounds good. We like to kind of have an organic back and forth discussion. And, I think both of us have a lot of cool experiences that we want to share. And hopefully everyone listening will, relate and find some lightness and also helpful information too. So yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I know that we have been doing two questions that we send to each other that we know about to start with. And then we have two that are sort of like grab bag, like surprise style. Yeah.
Grab bag.
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah.
Remember the days of the grab bag? That was like,
yes, we need to bring the grab bag back. In fact, maybe in my classes, I'll start having a grab bag.
Yeah, I remember we had like monkey money was what they called it back when I was in elementary school. And you got to like pick something from the magical treasure chest of toys. So
you get to buy a chance at the grab bag.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Well, speaking of grab bag, this is the first question that I've already shared with Ty. And so here it is. Role models, mentors, and influencing individuals are people that we all need in our life. Who are a couple of people who have positively shaped or influenced you or had a major impact on your perspective of life?
Yeah, I like this one, except for the fact that I couldn't come up with just a couple of
It's people. Hard.
It's really hard, and then I ended up making like categories of,
of maybe people, we can have a whole episode where we can talk about all the people,
all the stages of life where we were influenced. Yeah. So yeah, I can kind of, start with just a few. Obviously, there's so many in my family. I had my parents obviously growing up and sister, and then I had two sets of grandparents that I spent a lot of time with growing up, so obviously there were a lot of things, that they taught me and showed over the years, like kind of unconditional kindness, empathy, a work ethic early on, that I felt like was really good. So there was obviously the family support and dynamics were definitely a big part of it. But then I started going into my school, and there was a gifted teacher. It was called the gifted program, where certain kids were, I guess, screened, or our IEPs suggested that, it would be helpful to be, placed in that program. And I only knew her for 1 or 2 years, I think. But during that time, she introduced us to things like Harry Potter. And that was like a huge, like creative, fantasy type thing. And I think opened up a lot of creative thoughts and thinking, going through that process. So her name was Heather Schuler, and I somehow over the years lost touch, but just for that short time, I felt like that was kind of an initiation type thing into, thinking like openly and more creatively and working with people that, we're very diverse too, with all the students that we had. So that was a good one. And then obviously going into college, I had some graduate advisors that, had really, I thought they helped a great deal with letting me know that accessibility was something we could change, at least somewhat in the university level, right? Because I think so many of us go into it thinking, well, that's just kind of how it's set up and we just have to deal with it. But I had a couple of professors that worked with me to get push button doors. I think I mentioned that maybe in another podcast or something before, but that was huge to be like, yeah, we can, like, I can do the job in the science and learning, but I can also be involved in changing something for people later on, so that's, I think that was really cool. And kind of activating my advocacy side of things, which has been huge, I think for me, for sure, the last few years. And just like people like when I found Shane Burkhaw, and then there's another gentleman named Steve Gleason who has ALS.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar with who Steve Gleason is.
Yeah, so those two are inspirational in a different way, because all of a sudden I felt comfortable, like, oh, there's high profile people sharing their story with a progressive muscle disease. Right. And it doesn't have to all be sad, depressing, like, poor me, like, like I don't even have a life or anything like that. So it was, or
you
really
don't, you also cool. Like, you don't have to like be like Stephen Hawking's or something, right? You can just be a regular,
you can be a human dude. Like, just I mean, living your daily life, you can be funny and have humor, and you can talk about things that are maybe not necessarily, what would you say, like the status quo or that people are comfortable with, like you can kind of push the edge of acceptance of disability and the fact that we're all connected. And so I think just seeing them from afar, watching their content, reading their books, I felt like a little bit empowered and like I wasn't alone, going through this, because, the examples I'd seen in wheelchairs other than myself before was just like doom and gloom, sadness, so that was huge. But that's just kind of variety of
A grab
inspirations from
bag.
people. Yeah, exactly.
A grab
Yeah,
bag,
I
if
took
you
that to
will.
heart apparently. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's kind of, my approach on thinking of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
Um,
think once you find like those individuals like Shane Burkaw and Gleason that you can, I mean, I have a couple of my own that I've found in adult life. You can kind of you can all of a sudden imagine yourself in something, in a role in your life that maybe was hard to imagine before because you hadn't seen an example of it, right? Like,
right.
yeah,
Yeah. And I think so much of that, it's hard to find them as far as someone with a similar enough disability, because like I grew up in a rural, area, and there were very few wheelchair users, period.
right,
And even in college there were a handful, but really, it's so spread out, and there's
right.
other departments and things. So yeah, it was getting online and maybe having time after my surgery to actually just browse YouTube and look into volunteering, that kind of was like, oh,
Well,
light
yeah,
bulb moment, to see people you can relate to
we
that way.
we don't always have time in our schedule, or in our, like, we don't always prioritize like that time for kind of finding yourself or getting comfortable in your own skin. A lot of times we're just moving and going through the motions and
It's
kind
a
of like
machine.
faking it or whatever. I don't know. Yeah,
I mean, just
yeah,
like not even having time to really process, I don't think.
right, not
Yeah.
exactly.
Especially, and you can relate more than anybody being that, in a PhD program, and then, with Lisa and everything. I mean, your time is just, it's maxed out.
You do, yeah. And I know people talk about self-care a lot, but I think, part of that is like what you said, it's just slowing down and pay attention to how you feel, pay attention to like when you're frustrated, pay attention to like why, like get to know your,
Self-awareness, right?
yeah, get to know yourself a little bit. I mean, to me, that's, finding some positive role model that you can imagine yourself kind of, um, taking after, or, and something like that is really a way to change your perspective of your own life, which I think you kind of mentioned already. Like,
Yeah.
it really does change a lot. Like, I would
Yeah.
say two of the most influential people in my adult life would be kind of spinning off of that idea. One is a priest that I met um, in Portland, Texas, many years ago, probably 15 years ago. And
Mhm.
I never considered myself like into religion, or even really, especially like Christian religions and stuff like that, because I always kind of knew a lot of Christian hypocrites and stuff like that. And I was always in trouble. I was always a bad kid. And this man spent time getting to know me and helping me understand where I could find an access point to spirituality, and that it was for me, even though I was in trouble a lot, and like kind of at odds with my family and
Mhm.
things like that. I deserved a spiritual path as well, and he showed me that, and it was very important. And I still talk to him. And then another
Did you think
person.
did you think things were different or improved for the better, like after you sort of realized that you could find your own sort of spirituality? Did that all of a sudden, was it like a light bulb thing, or
It wasn't a light bulb thing. It took a
uh,
lot of time. It took a lot of time in learning like what I needed from a sense of spirituality. I had never realized how much anger I was carrying around, or how much I was judging other people, or how I was kind of meaner to the people that were closest to me, and just little things like that, he taught me how to examine my conscience and think about things deeply, to examine my own actions and the way I interact with people. And it took a lot of time.
yeah, yeah.
And I still suck. I mean, I'm still not like, but
We all have our moments, right?
I'm
Like,
still learning.
but you
I'm
have the
trying.
tools, though. I mean, you have the knowledge
Yeah.
and the tools to kind of step back and be like, whoa, like, let me assess this for a minute and figure out how to process and then move forward. And
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think over time, what I learned from him was one key rule for life, and that's always try to find things to love about people, and to always try to love your neighbor. And the one
I
thing
love
he
that.
taught me about that is that it's not easy. Like, that's why there are religions built around helping us cope with life, because it's not easy to love everybody. It's not easy, to forgive people and not judge people when we're stressed and we're like, oh, look at that person over there, they're driving like that just to piss me off, or
Right, right.
that's just a little example, but uh, that it's okay if you have a hard time loving everybody. It's okay. That means you're human. And
Right.
just kind of learning to live in that space makes the endeavor a little bit lighter, right?
I
It feels
agree.
okay. And then when you do screw up and judge somebody, you just recognize it and try to make it right and then move on.
Right, right. It's a learning experience, and none of us are perfect, obviously, but I feel like moments like that and people like that that we can interact with and get to know that help us
Yeah.
realize that we can extend that kindness and empathy to people. And you know, my grandmother on my dad's side was, you know, so much about that. Like she would welcome anybody into the home, like
Yeah.
complete strangers, like give them a bedroom and cook a meal. And I mean, it's those things that, you know, looking back, I see now how important that is, especially, you know, with so much of what all of us are going through, disability or non-disabled. You know, there's just
Right.
life is obviously not easy and continues to test us, you know. So
Right.
those moments
And
and those people that help guide us, you know, like that's it's so important to me.
yeah, and I would just say I bet your grandma had a pretty rich and full life because when we do open our hearts up and try to love everybody, you end up like miraculously, you end up with more friends. You end up
Right.
in having better relationships with people in your family. You end
Right.
up liking the people you work
and
with. Like it's
and for
real funny.
me, when you try to help somebody else or put the focus on helping other people, it's more fulfilling, and I don't focus in so much on the negatives that I perceive as, you know,
Right.
like victim mentality or something that, you know,
Right.
is dragging me down. Like, well, let's step away from that and focus on somebody else, because obviously people have it much worse than, you know,
Right.
than we do. So I just love that idea of that golden rule, unconditional kindness. At least try to implement that.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, that actually, I know we were going to go with the preset questions first, but that actually is a really good bridge to my surprise question. Actually, it makes a lot of sense. So if
Okay.
you're okay, we can
Do
jump
it.
into
Yeah, we
that.
can I'm
Yeah, we
game.
can
Let's go.
we can have a grab bag of questions too.
All
Um,
right.
so mine is how. Wait, sorry, that was last week's. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on boundaries, because there's this unavoidable like spillover effect, I feel like, between like professional and personal life, or especially
Oh
with
yeah.
social media, you know, like how things can sort of cross over and spill over into one another. And it's hard to know really how to um, avoid that, because it can create like anxieties. You can overshare, undershare, that kind of stuff. So just, you know, your thoughts on boundaries and how we approach them.
Wow, you're really good with the surprise questions. That's a good one.
Oh, thank you.
Um, Boundaries are something that I've also had to do. It have been a learning process for me throughout my entire life. Um, Social media used to terrify me because of boundaries because I didn't get. I'm kind of like a late bloomer, maybe when
Mhm.
it comes to stuff like that. Because like at first, it really terrified me that I could put something about myself on here and then everyone can see it, and that like it just felt like almost like walking around in my underwear or something.
Mhm.
So I just stayed away from it for the most part. Um, and then one of the things that I've found as far as boundaries are concerned when it comes to social media is like I have like my social media community, right?
Mhm.
That really grew organically out of need. It wasn't something where I was like, oh, I'm going to set up my social media personality, you know, or,
Right.
and so basically one boundary that I have is like people who I know in my real life, um, aren't really part of my social media community. And that I know you in real life. That sounds weird, right? It's like,
Right, right,
but it's like, it's for people that I meet for kind of this part of me, right? And I mean,
right.
I
And
do
I mean,
have,
that's how we initially met too, was that
right.
same way. So the fact that it, as you know, we did get to meet in person and everything is just like an extra
Yeah.
bonus. But yeah,
Yeah, so that's kind of one boundary. And I would say like it's not like nobody can follow
true.
me or nobody could, that's it's not like a hard and fast rule, but for the most part, like, you know, my students and people I work with, people in my family aren't really like I mean a few people in my family, but like for the most part, I try to kind of keep a little bit of boundary there. But in the, you know, and then also keeping it like on social media, like just never posting things like that say too much about any one individual, stuff like that. I'm sure
Right,
you know that, but like
right.
but boundaries like real boundaries like in life like you know where you have boundaries with your friends, you have boundaries with your family, you have boundaries with people you work with, you have
Hmm.
boundaries with your students, you have boundaries with your child or whatever, you know, that's always kind of been a difficult thing for me because I was kind of raised like this like say how you feel, if you relate to something someone's talking about you need to like tell them everything, like kind of just spill your guts all the time
Mhm.
type of thing, and like you should be able to act the same way around every person, and kind of just following these arbitrary rules that didn't really make any sense and made it really hard for me to have relationships that didn't
Mhm.
go sour, like where I would always end up at odds with my friends, or always mad at my boyfriend, or always,
Mhm.
in a fight with my brother. And I think a lot of what I've learned about boundaries, like, um, is just how much of myself that I share. And that's how you can keep things as light or as heavy as you like. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about last time with like trusting people,
Right.
like
Building that
talking.
trust.
Yeah. So like I'll spill my guts with certain people. And if I kind of get to know someone, I might spill my guts a little bit, or, just and more like for the other people, right?
Mhm.
That's kind of what I've learned is like if I'm messy with my boundaries, if I make it unclear to other people like what I want or what's bothering me, or don't tell you when something's bothering, and I'm just kind of sitting over here waiting
Mhm.
for you to read my mind, or like
Yeah.
that's not fair.
Right.
That puts people that sets everyone up to lose with you, right?
Right. Well, and it takes a level of openness too, right? Like, I mean, and understanding how you communicate those boundaries to people that, you know, maybe you don't want to be extremely open with, but you want to be open enough so they understand what your intention and feelings or thoughts are on something. But
Right. And
it's
yeah.
a lifelong journey. I think figuring out the layers of the boundaries and
Yeah.
who to open up to, and I know that even there's examples of online interactions that have gone extremely south because those boundaries weren't there at the beginning,
Right.
and I know that's something that I was late to the party on with social media too, because I had only used it just to like see pictures, maybe get news updates.
Yeah.
I never thought I would be one of those like, oh, let me share a video about these desserts I had this week, or
Yeah.
or like what a day is like with a ventilator and driving my chair. I mean, I was just like, I'm not going to ever be one of those people because I'm
Right.
going to keep the disability boundary and all these things in real life just completely, isolated from social media. And obviously that's gone completely the other direction
But that
since
goes back to
surgery.
like
But
an arbitrary rule that you were following, that you
yeah.
had set up for yourself that you thought was a boundary, but it was really not benefiting you anymore at a certain point, right?
Mhm.
I think the biggest lesson for me was with having nurses in my house, because that's when I really had to sit with myself and be like, you need to grow up, Marilyn. Like, you need to set some boundaries with these women. They're in your
Mhm.
house to help you. And you're just kind of sitting over here in the corner like a 14-year-old, huffing and puffing, and they don't even know what the hell you're thinking. Like
Yeah.
it was learning how to develop those type of relationships. And then also like realizing that not all boundaries have to be hard and fast.
True.
You don't have to sit down with somebody and be like, here's the boundaries, because I tried that too.
Yeah.
I
Like, let's
tried that
sit
and it
down
was
and list out
stupid,
every single, yeah.
because then you have to make sure you're never breaking the boundaries
True.
either, right? And
So you
sometimes
set
that's
a rigid
hard.
hard line. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So like and I always kind of was always looking at my mom like, well, how do I set boundaries with my mom, and like as I've gotten older, it's like, oh, I know how to set boundaries with her. Just don't talk to her
Yeah.
when I don't
Yeah.
want to. And
Right.
if she starts asking me a bunch of questions about something that's none of her business, I don't have
Yeah.
to answer her.
And see, that's another boundary I was thinking about too, is that there's that boundary between how you like split your time. It's kind of a balance thing too, but like, you have a certain boundary for having alone time versus family time versus time with,
Right.
with your job, basically.
Yeah, you
Like,
just made me think of something else too. Go ahead.
yeah, but that's like a whole nother, yeah, I mean, it is kind of a boundary, right? Like I need this certain amount of time, like for my own thoughts and to gather myself and like not let my emotions affect, people around me. I need that time to kind of process things. But yeah,
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 and also like one thing that you made me think of when you said work is like boundaries with my time too, because I can end up working on stuff for work all day, every day if I don't set boundaries. So I
right,
have started like when I'm prepping for a class, I'm like no more than an hour. That's a reasonable amount of time. I
right,
don't need a whole day,
right,
or like when I'm I might spend a whole day working on like a paper or something, but not
right.
just,
But
but not
at
like,
least like you can step back and be like, I'm not going to be spending, 14, 16 hours a day on and being in graduate school and writing, research articles and teaching. I mean, your time can get completely buried in all the phases that are involved with that. So I think that was something I had to really come to terms with. And even now getting back into not necessarily a full-time job, but increasing my productivity in sort of a professional, semi-professional way. I have to be like, okay, well, remember this last time you did this, you let it get out of hand and your time was completely zero boundaries. So yeah, it's
yeah, you have to learn.
tricky dance you have to do with that, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. And you're always still kind of learning
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Never ends.
Right. It doesn't. So yeah, I'm just curious what, your thoughts were on all that. So that was really good.
Yeah, that was a nice lead in.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's see, you're probably up with what the surprise question now.
Is it time for my surprise
so.
question? I tried to make it a little less cerebral and just a little more fun this time. So I was just kind of wondering if there was one thing that you could, one place that you could travel to, what would it be?
And that's any country, right? Like any destination anywhere.
It could be
are we
another
doing time travel or?
Yeah, dude, let's include time travel.
Let's just go. Yeah, full options on the table. Oh wow.
Yeah.
Let me think. I mean,
who would you like to
first? Meet? Ooh, that even gets more.
Okay, that's like a totally different question.
Yeah, that's a good one still. But
yeah, I kind of want to know that too. Who would you like to meet?
I would really like to go. I mean, I've kind of gotten more and more into sort of nature, getting outside, seeing national parks, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
I'm just saying, like, if I could do it in a safe way that doesn't involve me getting eaten alive, going back to like some of the first, like most pristine wilderness areas that were sort of untouched,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like almost like that, Lewis and Clark thing, but even further, like, could we go, even dinosaurs, Ice Age, like somewhere in that
to see what the world looked like.
Yeah, just like be right in the middle of it, Jurassic Park style, without being eaten as they show in the movies. But yeah, I don't know. I just think there's so many cool places like that. Like, Yellowstone, I got to visit a few summers. My sister worked up there as a park ranger, and
cool.
Obviously tourism has completely changed Yellowstone and regulations and population control, all that kind of stuff. But I just feel like as amazing and beautiful as that was, picture it without any buildings, any people,
right? Like before
that raw nature feel to it.
Yeah,
I just think that would be really cool, to be able to do that.
And to like live with like an indigenous Native American people or nation for a while and just like really see what they did, because there's nothing really documented that well that we know things, but like I want to see what it was really like.
What it was really like, yeah.
And how they
make it in a way that's not like threatening, taking over, pushing them out. I mean, just just a pure. I'm going to sit back and see and learn and listen. About what they're doing.
To exploit anything.
Exactly.
No colonizer vibes. Just hanging out.
Just like complete learner status, students.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that would be really cool. And then I don't know, I can get crazy with like going into the future, like seeing where, I don't know, say somebody with muscular dystrophy or severe progressive, type of disease, like where is the technology? Where is like their place in society? How is that changing? You can go, or I could go crazy with all the different permutations of, of where you can visit. But that just really natural, cool nature place that probably isn't wheelchair accessible in any way. But yeah.
Well, there's no time machines either. So, we can just like imagine.
We can dream about it.
We can dream about it. I always wanted to be able to go back, like, because I read Little House on the Prairie books. I wanted to like go and physically like be with Laura Ingalls Wilder in her house on the prairie. I wanted to like go to school with her. And I didn't even know there was a TV show of Little House on the Prairie, because and then I think a couple of years after I read the books, I found out about the TV show and I was like, oh, this is awesome. But it wasn't really. It wasn't really like what I had imagined. But.
So kind of like the homestead type.
Yeah.
That would be really cool. Yeah. I like that question a lot. That's that kind of like.
Well, the time travel element really took it like to a new level.
Made it more of an escape.
Cool question.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. And I always kind of wanted to like know what it would be like to live with the dinosaurs too, ever since I was a kid. I wanted to I thought it would be scary, but I really wanted to try it.
Right. And the idea, of something that size and like, I don't know, people can imagine, but they really have no concept, I don't think, of, like even
to see it like
think about lions or like sharks even now, like, but we're talking 3-4 times
Something that literally like looks like a monster.
Yeah,
Some
yeah,
kind of
exactly.
a
Godzilla in real life.
giant lizard. Like
Yeah.
people are terrified of lizards.
That
You
too.
imagine? Like, yeah,
Even the little kind ones that don't hurt anybody. But
exactly.
Yeah. Well, that was a good one.
Yeah, your answer was good.
Yeah. Well, are you ready to go to the next one?
Your
I'm trying to
question.
remember which question we have next.
I think the one
that was
on, yeah, the one you shared with me.
Yeah. Okay. Let me get to my notes. Okay, here we go. All right. So this one is a little bit more about just how you and I have met and gotten to know each other. So I know when we were first instant messaging and kind of like just regular conversation, kind of, learning about our stories and stuff. But what was like the most fun or enjoyable part, would you say, of like our initial meeting in person? And it was kind of a lucky thing that we just happened to meet in person, after just a few months, I think, of messaging. But like, what was your favorite part that you remember from when we first met?
Well, I would say just, getting to see someone that you've only met online, obviously in person. And then just kind of like realizing how much that we shared in common about like views about disability and how others perceive disability. And then, going off of that and kind of working on some of these collaborative posts and stuff that we do, or like you talking to my students on Zoom, and just taking that knowledge that we kind of discovered that we shared that day, and delivering it like to others in really crafty way, like artful way. I think I say you and I both have an understanding of how like you got to meet people where they're at. You don't want to be like too in your face or like accusing people of things, or too angry, or you chase people away, right?
Right.
And so yeah, just learning that we could figure out how to share things that we feel the same way about, like with other people, in kind of creative ways. I like the collaborative posts that we've done, and one of my favorites is the Black disabled activists post that we did. I forget which. I think it was maybe during Disability Pride Month.
I think yeah, or it might have even been a Juneteenth one,
yeah, I think it was June. Yeah. Because that one was really important to me, because I felt like that was one of our more profound posts that we did, where and you did most of the work, but I think I had started talking about Harriet Tubman, how she was disabled and had epilepsy, and
that was kind of like the catalyst thing.
Whenever I started my journey as like a scholar or whatever, I was really into post-colonial theory, anti-colonial theory, and just learning how racial those type of interactions have shaped our knowledge and our power relations and the way we look at the world. And whenever the tribes and nations encountered one another, it was like the way the powerful described the other was the way that we now perceive the world, or something of that nature. I don't know. Anyway, Edward Said does a better job of explaining it than I do. But, after I had Louisa and I'm sitting in critical theory and like research methods, and I got introduced to disability theory, and I started really kind of diving into this idea of disability as all of these different social constructions. Like, your impairment is real, but there are all of these separate social constructions of disability. And then sitting back and thinking, oh my God, like all of that colonial history of conquest and everything, there's one phenomenon that is across all colonial experiences, and that is something that's never talked about, and that's that there were disabled people there too, and what happened to them, and how, and it's not well documented, but we that's kind of where I think the critical theory comes in, to start looking at that, right? And then I started finding other critical theories that looked at stuff like that in literature.
It's so interesting too, like how that was such a common thread, I feel like, through all of those times of colonialism and everything. It's like, well, there were disabilities, and how are they impacted? How are they marginalized? And what are the intersections between groups? I mean, that's...
And how wouldn't you love to know, like, the way that the mothers felt? Or, you see, like, representations of disability in, like, the Bible a lot of times through the way the mother is coping, or... and you'll see representations of disability in literature, in fiction literature, but it's always, like, it's usually, like, there's a word for it, Botkian chronotype. So they're either like mystical creature, like the blind man who stares in the distance and knows something that nobody knows. That type of representation,
like
of
on the boundary or on the edge of of society or something almost. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's not like a real humanizing
Yeah. Yeah.
representation.
And
It's
I
like
still
you're
think,
otherworldly, you're like from a different domain of existence.
and the accessibility factor, like how many were just almost bedbound 24/7 with, I mean, something like muscular dystrophy, you know,
Right.
I just, the amount of change and just technology and everything had to
Well,
evolve so much
yeah, exactly. I mean, and people just had to work so hard too, you know,
for
in different
small gains,
periods.
and there's still, I mean, that's still happening.
Right.
But yeah.
I think one of my first real, like, authentic narrative accounts of disability that I ever heard was from my great grandma, who lived in 3 different centuries. She was born in the 1800s. She had a daughter who died of multiple sclerosis, and she one time, I knew about it and I wanted to know more, and so I went and sat with her. She was like 98 years old, and she was quick as a. She was a really smart lady, and she told me the whole story of how Ruth started getting sick, what happened, the way she dealt with it, how she took care of her, how she carried her out of bed every morning and put her in a chair. And it was just incredible to hear. You don't hear
So
this.
you were getting a firsthand account of like
Yeah.
caregiving too, and
Yeah,
what
exactly.
that involved. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And how she just talked about it so, like, um, I wouldn't say in a clinical way, but in a way that was very matter of fact,
yeah.
not emotional. But
Were you surprised that it, you know, was that matter of fact when she talked about it?
Well, I cried.
Yeah.
When she told me about it, because it was
Yeah.
very sad. But not really surprised that she was like that, because she was a very stoic woman. She was always kind of like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I imagine it's interesting to think about, like, for me growing up with MD and everything, like that's a firsthand experience, but you always wonder, or I have in the back of my mind, like, what's that like for the, you know, parents, extended family, and what that interaction, how they feel about it and how it evolves over time. I think that's kind of, knowing those perspectives is, it's kind of helpful, but it's also hard in some ways, you know, because I feel like when you're living with it, it's different, you know. Yeah, but that's really cool. I like, it feels like that post that you're mentioning came together really quick, like the day of. I think we had that idea, and then I felt like there were
you did a bunch of
resources,
research.
And I'll always remember I found that picture of several of the first disability advocates with the banner, you know, that says, has that Dr. Martin Luther King quote about what was it, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, or something like that. And right away I was like, wow. I had in graduate school, I was part of an NSF fellowship program that, you know, I was lucky enough to get 3 years of funding for it. But the coordinator, who I met with 2 or 3 times a year, I remember she always had that at the end of every email. And it was just like, I just noticed it sort of, just scanning. Yeah. And I was like, hey, that's a good quote. But then years later to see it on that picture with the disability advocacy, and like, whoa, this is full circle here, you know, and it's just, that's such a powerful message, you know, and I just think it really struck me. So like, this has to be part of our post on that. So I just felt like that was really good. I like how we're able to sort of go back and forth on these lists and come up with ideas, maybe, and present them in a way that hopefully, you know, spreads awareness. And
I kind of like the way like the topics kind of sometimes arise from things like when we were both moving at the same time, like we were both kind of making these big moves. And then, like, you know, finding things that we like, doing the tracheostomy awareness post, things like that just kind of bring our experiences together in a finished product.
Yeah. And the timing's weird, huh? Because we were both, I mean, we're talking major life changes, you know,
big.
I think how long had you lived in the Corpus area? Like, was it lifelong, pretty much? Yeah.
20 years. I had lived in Portland for 10 years. Yeah.
And so what was that like for you though? Like, moving, I mean, because you're talking several hours away, right? Like, north.
It's about 4 hours. 4 hours.
4 hours. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, at least, I mean, it still had to feel kind of extreme though, didn't it?
Well, the good thing was I was very nervous about starting my new job. So I was just kind of like, you know, running on fumes and adrenaline for a while until things caught up with me. And then, you know, I mean, the big thing, I think you and I both can like relate to this in different ways, is just like kind of the dynamics with everybody else when you're moving, right? Like, my parents were really like hard to deal with.
And then like explaining it to my daughter and leaving my
leaving my nurse behind
Mhm.
that I loved so much. I never get to see her
I think
anymore.
that's
That
something
was
that's not,
hard.
it's not brought up enough. I don't think is,
Yeah.
you're changing. It's not just your family relationships, but it's everything. It's your entire network in that area. And if you
It's
do
a
have,
lot for people with medical
if
complexities.
you
It's
have good
huge.
nurses, good doctors, I mean,
And then
the,
you leave them and you
the
take
decision's not made
chances.
lightly, right? Like
Right.
there's so much involved, but I can't
And
even
then even
imagine.
getting things set up, I mean, you probably understand. It's like, well, it's kind of more annoying for not more annoying. And I don't mean that. I mean, I find it annoying because it's like extra things I have to do in addition to taking care of myself, and I can barely take care of
Which
myself.
is enough.
I
I mean,
haven't
it's so
been, I don't
much.
even know. Like, I went to the CVS clinic because I'm sick. I don't even have a doctor.
Oh, a primary,
I don't
because
have
all
a
the focus has been on
And I
Louisa's
haven't even
care. And
found her a primary care physician either because we've been to the pulmonologist 100 times. And every time I go, I'm like, you know, primary care physician yet? I'm like,
right.
get off me.
I know.
Like,
Stop forcing it.
dying. Leave me
I
alone.
know. I know.
I want to do this. Come on.
And it's funny, like when I was first setting up, I picked a neurologist first,
Uh-huh.
and primary was one of the last
Yeah.
ones that I made. And I'm like, do I really even need a primary care? And I was
They
like,
should have
well,
a different name for them for people with medical complexities. We call it
and what's
secondary.
crazy is like, can't the neurologist make all the same decisions and write prescriptions? And like, can't they serve the purpose of primary and specialty?
Exactly.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Exactly.
But it's funny though, because I have met with my primary, and sometimes the prescription refills are quicker, or like the correspondence is faster, which is good. But I don't know. It's interesting how back in New Mexico, I was just like, I had a primary and that was it until
Okay.
the surgery. And so I was very resistant. Like my neurologists in New Mexico when I was younger were just not helpful. They put me on prednisone, and like that was the only thing. And all the side effects were bad. And
Yeah, that's awful.
lucky enough, my parents, they were like,
Figured.
they let me make the decision as well, but it was collective. So it was
Good.
like, we're not going to keep going to this place. It's dragging us down, and
Right.
I was getting into college and research. And so I had these negative, like, I'm just never going to go, and I barely saw the primary.
Yeah.
But coming out here, obviously after I'd been in ICU and I'd seen 100 nurses and doctors or whatever, but out here it was like, I finally was like, okay, I can build a team, and so I think the move was actually positive for me because I
With
actually
that.
had options, this time.
Yeah, and I think that whole like reluctance thing is
Mhm.
very, very, I resonate with that a lot because I have, we have a pulmonologist here and she's been sick and we have a primary care, but I need to like get her set up with a cardiologist. And it's like, I just know, I mean, it's going to be like a domino effect of
Oh,
other
yeah.
things are going to be set into action. And so I'm just like, oh,
New stress and new worry. I mean, there's just,
how long can I bury my head in the sand? And
yeah.
I'm just kidding. But yeah.
I mean, I totally get that because I saw a gastroenterologist for this PEG tube. I told you a
Oh
little bit
yeah,
about
you
that,
told
but
me about that. Yeah.
apparently the way it was installed in New Mexico makes it where I would have to
Have a
have
complete
anesthesia, have a
surgery,
complete
yeah.
procedure to get it removed and replaced. And so now I'm just like, I hope this thing doesn't break or tear or force me to go in there, because that, like you said, it's going to set off a whole
Right.
reaction of new things. So yeah, I totally get that.
And then yeah, totally. And then so then you kind of have this like, okay, do I just wait for something to happen or should I be proactive? And then sometimes after a while you feel like a lot of the proactive stuff that you're fed, your soul is bullshit. Sorry.
It is. It really is.
Like Louisa's sick plan is bullshit. Like it does not keep her well. It just prolongs the process of her getting a really bad respiratory infection.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really.
I mean,
but whatever.
It's a hard thing learning that the doctors are not always, I mean, some of them have good feedback, good thoughts, but you don't have to always follow every single suggestion or I mean, it's just, and what's trivial to them, it's easy for some.
It's easy for you to say because you get,
Well, because even the surgeon, he was like, yeah, it's no big deal. We'll just swap it out, put you under anesthesia. And I'm like, dude, do you know the last time I had anesthesia?
Yeah.
I was 40 days in ICU after that. So don't talk to me
about thanks.
About how simple that procedure is. So yeah.
And I've had doctors say stuff to me like, I can't even think of anything in particular. And I'm like, how would you like it if I did that to you?
Exactly.
How would you like
or I even had a specialist. Yeah. A specialist come in and say that they had a treatment for that for younger kids now, if you were that age. And I'm like, first of all, dude, I have muscular dystrophy, not not the disease that he was talking about, which
Right.
that's great. If like, I love the fact there's technology.
That's
that
also a
can-
stupid thing for him to say anyway.
yeah, like what's
how
the point?
insensitive. Like, who are what? Yeah.
And as much as, you know, I think highly of so many people back in New Mexico and in the medical department and professors that are there and everything, but there were several specialists that I was done working with them because
Yeah.
there were things like that going on. So yeah.
Yeah,
it's-
there are some really bad doctors out there who have like the social social intelligence of I don't know, of Elon Musk. I don't know. Like I've had some
Exactly.
doctors say some really screwed up stuff to me that wasn't even their play. It wasn't even. I've had doctors accuse me of being an angry mom.
Yeah.
That I'm angry at them because my kid is disabled.
Mhm.
I I don't know. I just it's like, oh wow, you all don't really know everything, and some of you are complete assholes.
Yeah, complete. I was thinking my first trach replacement where I had to swap out, you know, and actually pull out the entire trach and put a new one in was, well, first of all, it was an experience that I couldn't travel yet without, like, I couldn't put my legs down in my wheelchair. It was so early on after my ICU visit, but they took me there in an ambulance, and the guy that came in to do, can't remember the department name. It was extremely long, like I don't remember. I'm not going to try to pronounce the department.
Laryngoscopy.
Basically, yeah, we'll go with that. But yeah, he basically like cauterized the area around it because it was bleeding slightly. But
And what, your stoma?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, and
Oh,
I mean,
dude, I have a story like that
yeah.
too.
Do
When
you?
Louisa was an infant, I had just brought her home from the NICU. We had
Yeah.
been home like a week, and I had all these doctor's appointments, and I had this psychotic nurse that was going with me everywhere.
Mhm.
She was like, yeah, she was Looney Tunes. And we went into the ENT, and I was just, I mean, I was just confused all the time. I didn't know what the hell was going on. The ENT's talking to me. The nurse was like holding Louisa and was kind of like talking to the doctor and like
Mhm.
acting like I wasn't part of the conversation or whatever. And Louisa had like this very tiny little granuloma that
Yeah.
we were told in the NICU was perfectly fine and
Yeah.
not to mess with it. Because anyway, that area can bleed a lot if it is cut because it's very vascular. You know that.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so they're talking, they're yapping, and they decide some shit about the granuloma. And I'm like, wait, what are y'all doing? What are you talking about? And Cynthia was like, she's just going to put some silver nitrate on the stoma. And I was like, silver nitrate? Okay, well, that's the same stuff. That's like they use all this silver crap. And I'm like, what is that even really? Like, you just putting silver shit on cuts?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
is this some kind
Is that
of
because
thing
it
that's
sounds
supposed
kind of
to
fancy?
impress me? Yeah, like whatever.
That's the state of the art technology.
We put silver in it.
Yes.
Ugh.
They're going to shine and glitter like.
Yeah. So what it ended up being though was it burned her. They burned her stoma.
That's exactly what happened.
For
It
no
was the
reason.
worst. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I couldn't believe that they did that. Even, and I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Right. That's not the good.
Yeah, but yeah. So yeah, basically the same type of thing. It's like, okay.
And like our stories with that are not the first or the last, I don't think of.
No, I'm sure it happens
weird.
all the time. And it's so weird how, like, you go to an ENT, right? You go to a PICU or a NICU nurse or an ICU nurse or whatever, like, or even the pulmonologist, right? They don't know anything about trachs. They don't know anything about stomas. They don't know it's like.
And for me, that was eye-opening. It's like there's no communication between like doctor teams, and they
that's alarming.
Claim to read your 40-page medical history online, but they don't. They barely know the first thing. So yeah,
you really have to advocate for yourself because people will treat you like you're like visiting the garbage dump.
Right, and that's something I had to learn very late. It's like, mid-30s before I realized how much of a self-advocate, I needed to be. But anyway, that's a tangent into the realm of like medical lore with trachs and some of the bad procedures.
Oh God, we could tell a million stories. The last time we were in the hospital, I had this RT. She was so sweet. She was trying to get me my vent set up with a humidifier because I had travel set up and I didn't have a humidifier. She was so sweet, and she had made a few trips in and out trying to get the right stuff, and then she left and she came back because I assumed these other two people were like, "Hey, what are you doing? Why are you grabbing all this crap?" And so they wanted to come in and see what she was doing, and I'm sitting on the couch there. They all walk in. They don't address me. They don't speak to me.
Just like a team.
I must just be like some random asshole sitting in my chair. Anyway, they go over and they're looking at the vent and they're like, "Huh." what is this? Is this a CPAP machine?
Oh
And I'm like, you're a
no.
registered respiratory therapist. I stood up and I was like, if you could have seen steam coming out of
Oh,
my head.
I can already, yeah.
I grabbed the hose from him and I was like, it's not a CPAP machine, it's a ventilator.
I mean, how do
Idiot.
they not know the difference between, you know what's crazy? It's not quite that bad, but I would get the calls like, so how many hours you on your vent per day? I'm like, 24/7.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like and it just happened continuously. I'm like, don't you people read like the charts and the
Yeah.
information? But yeah, like, I mean, I can't imagine you sitting there and they come in and say that and you're just like,
I'm like,
I'm gonna lose my damn mind.
I was like, it's a Trilogy Evo. They were like, oh yeah, I've seen those before, and I'm like,
Yeah, sure.
yeah, right, okay,
Yeah. So bad.
I mean, what? Okay, never mind. I guess somebody would have a trach with a CPAP. That does happen, but I mean,
yeah, but
yeah,
still, just like the assumptions and pretending to know or understand what's going on and having
well,
no
and it
clue.
was the way they were talking about her vent setup, like
Yeah.
it was janky, like it was some piece of trash they never seen before. The lady was like, "Oh, this is some kind of home setup," and I'm like, "Yeah."
Well, see, I remember my first RT that came out and helped me in New Mexico, and she had this bag of just like random like valves or like connection points. She was like calling it a MacGyver bag or something of like all these random connection points. And I'm like, wow, they need to streamline this because we've got adapters sitting here that they're just so random. Like, how are you even going to replace them? But yeah, like you have to just grab parts and make sure it's connected. I don't know. It's exhausting, but you do have to have kind of a janky is not the word, but you have to have like, I don't know, some amount of, I don't know, creativity or
right. It's not
it
like,
is.
yeah, you kind of, you have to MacGyver stuff sometimes and you have
Yeah.
to wash and reuse things. And
I always like to put in like profiles and stuff now that I have some assembly required because of all these little valves and pieces that have to connect. But
yeah, I'm sorry. I was just reading a text message from somebody I work with.
Well, I was just thinking that was we went major tangent there.
Yeah.
But that's, I mean, scary how fast it happens with the medical stuff with the traits, because once we get there,
I'm sorry.
Mine's a Trilogy. Gosh, I can't even remember any of the other information right now on it.
Is it a 100 and Evo?
I think it's 100, but I haven't seen the front of it in so long because it's always it's always like behind my bed or behind my wheelchair.
Is going to stop making vents.
Did you hear that? Because there was a recall on that. Yeah.
Well, they're just stopping making them. Period.
But apparently, there's still a lot of perfectly normal functioning ones out there.
Yeah.
And they'll just gradually, I guess, phase in something else. Yeah, but
I think we're going to end up on an astral vent or
yeah. Well, hopefully it's not too extreme to switch over. I can't imagine it would be that bad. But then again, like what is it? I can't even remember the valve, but it's like the portable humidifier filter that goes into the travel ventilator hose, and
like the HME.
But that's the one that has like the little filter that moves as you're breathing. Yeah. So the first one I had had like this white layer or something, and it would set off this circuit disconnect alarm, and it still does it, but it was every 10-15 minutes and nothing was wrong. When
Luisa's on a travel single circuit like that, it does the same exact thing. It just alarms constantly, like there's a circuit disconnect or low minute volume.
But and if somebody's with you for the first time, or like you're in public and someone hears that, they're looking over like you're about to like spontaneously combust or something, like oh man,
like what is that?
Yeah. But I found these new ones that have like, it was a pure accident, but they have this blue like foam layer or something. But they don't set it off maybe once an hour. So
really? I wondered if her HMEs are getting too small, if she needs a larger one. But and the funny thing too is like a lot of times if she's on it and she sleeps for a while on the single circuit, it's like after like 45 minutes or so, it stops. It's so strange.
Weird. Yeah,
it's like the machine goes, oh, I get it now. Like we're on the travel setup. Okay.
Yep. The little robot droid finally figures out
the little man inside, the little gnome.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, the vent gnome. Oh, that's good. Oh man. Does she sleep with her travel hose set up? Like, can she like take naps or whatever with?
She can. And I mean, the only thing is after a while, she just starts to dry out. She has to have humidification.
Yep. And I've had that too.
I get that. Yeah.
Yeah, like only certain hours per day can I, be.
Right.
But then I'm gonna have to hook up to like regular humidity and get,
Right.
moisturize things.
And she's so funny because, like, when we're in the car, like, if we're on a trip, and she'll be like, "Mommy, I'm sleepy," because she wants to wear her vest. She's not really
Yeah.
sleepy. Like, she just wants to wear it, like,
Oh,
while we're in
really?
the car.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, when we're on really long car trips, it's
Yeah.
kind of like, "Hey, can you take that thing off for a little bit? Because it's just blowing air, dry
Yeah.
air at you for no reason."
I know. Yeah. And it's hard because I've had times where I want to go to sleep and they're like, well, no, you need to inflate your cuff, for safety to do that and take a nap or whatever. But yeah, I've taken a few and it's been okay, but now I'm just conditioned. I don't sleep really without
The cuff?
Yeah,
Or
without the
with the
cuff
humidifier?
inflated.
Oh,
Well, with it, well, I'm on when the cuff is inflated, I'm on the full humidified,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of there's some days I'm just like so ready to take a nap, and I'm like, well, I can't unless I swap out the entire, cuff setup. But
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's just stuff like that too. Like that spontaneity of like taking a nap or stuff that people just take for granted that you have to plan for,
yeah,
or like when I was telling you yesterday when we wanted to sleep out in the living room, like I had to tell her no because I'm like, your oxygen concentrator weighs 1,000 pounds and it's
Right.
upstairs. But you know what? I didn't have to put her on oxygen last
Oh,
night.
you didn't? Wow,
No.
that's good.
Yeah.
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 It's the victories like that, right? That make you
Yeah.
feel good every
So
day.
maybe tonight we'll try. I don't know.
But yeah, it's crazy to think, realize that seems like such a, just like easy, spontaneous, like kid,
Yeah.
decision, but then you have to account for all of that. And
Yeah.
everything is a procedure,
Everything.
it's yeah. And then like how the littlest thing can like derail your plans for the day, it's
Exactly.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, that was our 4 questions, I think. And
That
then
was our 4 questions
some
and some
bonus
extra.
content on trach lore.
I know. And you know
Yeah.
what? We needed, I feel like I gave up some of my good stories. We need to do it. We do need to do a trach episode.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And we don't have to use all of this content in one video. We can.
Okay.
Yeah. I will not publish that part either, but yeah. We'll have like an outtakes bonus reel or something someday about, fun content.
You can get like a shot of me picking my nose or something.
There you go. Yeah. Or like me, like sticking my tongue out for no reason, whatever. But, okay. Yeah. But, well, that was fun.
That was fun. I
Yeah.
enjoyed that. I feel like I'm glad you did that with my question with the time travel because I wanted to ask you something that wasn't about disability. Like I wanted just like a fun, but I was just like, I couldn't think of anything. So I was like, well, what about like if you could go anywhere?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
And
love
like
that
the
one
way you
because
added the time travel to it.
yeah. And we could go, I feel like we could have like another edition of that. We could just go through different types of travel, but yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
It was a good escape. I like that type of distraction.
Yeah.
Or thought experiment. Yeah.
Maybe one day we could like talk about like a fantasy world or something.
Yeah.
Where we could create our own social.
We could just build one.
Yeah. Like our own power relations and our own races.
That sounds
of people.
Good. Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
My brother and I used to do stuff like that.
Oh, did you? Oh man.
And he was fun before he turned into an old turd.
I guess age does that to some people. Age means I don't know how old he is.
Especially if you don't live well. Like if you don't like all the things we talk about, like things you learn about yourself and not trying to not make the same type of mistakes over and over again. And not having these things hanging over you. And
well, it's sad that not everybody has that awareness or that, ability to
learning how to build good relationships with people, like
and get out of bad ones.
He's never developed any kind of social coping skills like that. Like he just does the same dumb stuff over and over. Like now he's at odds with all his friends again, and that always ends up happening. Like the back to the boundaries thing. Because I'm like, you don't have to live with your friends and hang out with them.
Right. Well, like you can remove those like relationships too if they're not good.
Like, if somebody's treating you like crap, don't go back into your room and look in the mirror and be like, what did I do wrong?
Exactly.
You can also say like, hey,
maybe they did something.
Yeah.
That's another thing I feel like is a major topic we could dive into, because I think like for me with the whole disability thing, I know that in the past I had a tendency to be like, like I'm going to change my ways, and it's nothing anyone else ever does, right? Like it's always like something I could improve or I could change to be better.
Right.
And now it's like, well, no, like I don't want to spend time, or talk to certain people that don't treat.
And I think over time in my life, because I used to be like what you're talking, what we were saying too.
Yeah.
And over time, after so many times of me like feeling bad about somebody getting mad at me or not liking me or treating me like crap. And then seeing later like that they were like either like on drugs or cheating on their husband or, doing something real
Like
like
it was about something they were doing
right.
way more than you. Yeah.
And then you think like, oh, it wasn't me, it was them, or it wasn't all me, right?
Right.
You just learn over time, like, okay, well, yeah, maybe there's something kind of wrong with that person. I'll just back away a little bit.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
have to fix every ill-begotten
Exactly. And then
union.
like even you might be the most like empathetic person in the world, but still you have to learn like, well, there's only so much you can do to help somebody and understand where they're
Right,
coming from before you have to just cut it off and realize, well, it's not a reciprocal relationship. It's not helping.
right,
It's in fact it's tearing you down more than
right.
anything. So yeah, I think
And I think another hard thing to learn too is like when you have a very, and I'm going to go ahead and say this, I don't know what it's going to sound like,
that
but when you have a pretty pure, like, um, intention with people, like when some people are just like that. Like we don't use people. We don't like, um, throw people in the trash. You don't like,
it's not even a thought, right? Like we don't.
right. When
Yeah.
there's people like that, and then there's people who aren't like that.
Right.
And you have to learn that. You have to accept it. And it doesn't mean that you're a mean person. And that's something my brother, he's like, no, I have to see the good in everybody. And it's like, that's really not benefiting you at all. You need to be honest about
Yeah.
the realities of the way people are,
And
because
it
otherwise
would be nice, right? Like it would be nice if we could only see the good and ignore all the bad things, but you just
right,
can always do
right.
that. Yeah.
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 You have to protect yourself, and you can only do that if you call a spade a spade.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that took me a really long time. And even now I still struggle sometimes with that because, you want to approach even new people that you meet like they're not a bad person or they have good intentions, but you have to be
Right.
realistic and realize that no, that's not the case.
And in some way, over time, you also set your life up and the way you do things and interact with people to where it's not that interactions are not that consequential, like just
Mhm.
on a regular basis. Like you can have these kind of inconsequential relationships with people that don't have to go too far. You don't have to share. People don't really want you to sit around and share stuff about yourself at work. You can have good
Right.
relationships with people and just talk about work stuff. You don't,
Right.
like,
Again, that's kind of full circle with the boundaries again, right? Like
yeah, exactly.
you
Yeah.
can control kind of where those interactions lead
You
and what's involved.
100% can. And
Yeah.
even if it just means backing off and not answering the phone or just anything. I mean, you
Or
can,
you don't have
there's,
to respond right away,
yeah,
or
think about it for a while before you're done. Just all
yeah.
kinds of little things you can do. Like it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I think a lot of us walk around with these totally arbitrary rules of engagement that we're following for no reason because somebody told us when we were 5 that we needed to do that.
Right.
And of course, the rules for kids and adults are always different, right? Like
Exactly.
we're like you tell kids all the time, like, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And as soon as they turn 18, it's like, okay, now you need to start doing that.
Right. Yeah.
Now you
Now
need to
the
start
roles have
speaking up.
changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point. But yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I'm sorry I talk too much.
Hey, not at all. Like I like the tangent discussions, even if they make it into a different episode later on. So I like that.
Yeah, my brother is supposed to come over later today.
Oh, really? Oh, that should be interesting.
I know. I need to take Louisa to the grocery store.
Oh man, that reminds me. I just did my grocery shopping on Walmart.com. So yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm texting my brother real quick. You're grocery shopping on Walmart.com?
Yep. So even before the pandemic, I started doing it, but that's one of the more empowering things I feel like I get to do now with technology.
Cool.
I do a lot of the grocery shopping and yeah, obviously I can't pick it up, but I can at least pick out ingredients and,
I like that.
that kind of
That's
stuff.
awesome.
Yeah. I'm
That's
kind of an
cool.
undercover food like person. I kind of get into that. Yeah. Food nerd type situation. But yeah.
That's cool. I like that
Yeah.
you kind of took control of the grocery shopping.
Well, it's a good natural way to help, too. I think those are kind of
right.
nice.
Help
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Help out
not so
around.
much of a one-way street, because obviously the caregiving side for, the other parts of my family is pretty extreme. So yeah. I like the little independent autonomous things.
Yeah. Well, you need that. You need it
Yeah.
for your sanity.
Very, very much.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know the caregiving stuff is like, but I know you've probably been living with it for a long time, and
Yeah.
it probably gets complicated sometimes, and not as, but I don't know. I don't mind taking care of my kid, and I'm sure your mom feels
That's
the same way.
that's another realization though, I think for me, that maybe it was even later on, is that burden complex, that you hear about, that um, always worrying about, there's so much care involved
Yeah,
with a disability. And then after the trach and everything, that felt like it
got
was
more. Yeah,
magnified, like 10 times. But still, like the more I kind of understand and grow, and then see other people and how they, like the caregiving that you provide, Louisa and stuff too, even, it's just like, that's a family thing we just do, and it doesn't mean it's all bad,
right. It's
or that we
just
should feel,
right guilty
yeah,
about it, or
yeah, and yeah,
it's just a family thing. Yeah,
yeah,
like, and I think, as a parent, at least, speaking as a parent, like taking care of your family, especially as a woman, right? Like you something natural, like you want to care for others, and
it's
it
kind of an instinctive maybe, or just feel
yeah, and it
like
kind
it's
of like fulfills you with a little purpose. I mean, obviously times it can be tiring, exhausting,
true.
and everything like that, but I always at the end of the day think like, man, I'm so glad I'm needed
Yeah, well,
because I would
that's
be a different
important.
person if I wasn't. Yeah.
I know. I think that the family dynamic and bonds are like strengthened, don't you? Because we have, like, we're needed to help each other.
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing to have with, like when you have a really close knit family. So
Uh-oh.
yeah, yeah.